Welcome to Season 4 of Design Together, a podcast about how designers work together. This season, we'll be focusing on folks who are just in the first few years of their careers. We'll call it Starting Out. My name is Abby Guido, and I am your host. Hi, everyone. Today we have with us Vash Persaud. Vash is a designer and art director who lives and works in New York City. Hey, Vash. Nice to meet you.
Hi, guys. I'm so happy to be here.
All right. So, Vash, we're going to start and take a look back at your journey through higher education. So I'm curious if when you began studying, if you knew what you were planning on doing, or if you just kind of landed somewhere and found your way to design and advertising.
I think when I first started college, I definitely knew that being in creative was my passion. I knew that being a designer was what I wanted to do. But I think coming into university, like, you definitely have a different perspective of being a creative. And then once you start kind of going through classes and learning skills, like, everything changes in a better way because you start to learn that being a creative is so much more dynamic. So I think initially, like, I definitely knew that I wanted to be a creative, but that word became so much deeper, like, as I started and by the time I graduated.
And can you tell everyone where you went to school?
So I went to school at the New York City College of Technology, which is at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge.
And were you one of these kids that grew up, drawing and being creative? Is that what led you to know you wanted to study something in the creative field in college?
So I'm definitely not much of a drawer, but I remember playing these games back when I was younger, kind of similar to like the modern day Roblox. And there were like these kind of like bank balances. Like, I have $100 of game money, right? And so I remember going into the back end of the code of like my computer and like trying to edit the code so that it would say like if I had $100, it would say like I had $5 million in game. I remember feeling so cool. I was like, oh my God, I just changed that. And it like updated on my computer screen. And I think that was like my first memory that I like remember of being, wait, this is like something that I can actually do.
That makes sense. Can you tell us a little bit about the program at your university and what the experience was like for you?
Oh, definitely. I think it was a little bit like, for me, starting at City Tech was a little bit like one of those nervous things because, like, before you get into art school, it's definitely like talked about that there are all these amazing, private universities or schools that focus on more specific design programs. But CUNY was definitely the one that was more in my ball range, and I think was going to be the best option for me at that time in my life. So once I joined, I realized that like the program was so dynamic. I remember exploring it and seeing like that you were able to touch all of these different areas. A lot of people call it like the Bauhaus approach, like being able to learn a little bit of everything as opposed to focusing on just one single thing. And I really like that idea. When I started, the program had like these foundational courses. So you would literally get to learn foundation drawing. You get to learn a little bit of motion design, a little bit of web design. You learn a little bit of graphic design, typography. Like, you literally touch a little bit of everything. And I thought that was so amazing because it really added to my skills as a creative. And coming out, like, I literally would not rather have gone to any other university because that program really made me into the creative that I am today.
So was there a particular class that you can remember that you're like, oh yeah, this is what I want to be doing?
I think it's kind of funny. I think there were probably a couple of classes, but I think it was literally like the first class that I ever took. It was like typography 1, like my first ever class as a freshman in college. And my professor, he had like a really intricate teaching style. So we would go through like different elements of type and different elements of like type layouts. And then we would have to like kind of present them as though we were art directors, like every time that we had a new class. And I think being able to learn like a lot of detail-oriented things that coming into college I didn't know, like kerning, leading, the spaces, what each part of a letter means, like what are the strokes, what are they called? That really made me realize like, wow, like creative and being a designer is so much more intricate than what people like to make it out to be. And they kind of frame it in this way of like, oh, like you draw for a living or you create art for a living, like that's not going to get you anywhere. But I think in that moment of learning all of the detail oriented things really made me realize like this is where I want to be.
That makes a lot of sense. And I love teaching typography for those moments because there are, some rules and some structure you kind of have to learn. And it takes away that idea of this like kind of wishy-washy artistic pursuit. And it becomes, there is a lot of information to learn to be successful in this field. So I totally understand that experience. Did you have any internships while you were in school?
I definitely did. I had a couple of internships. Some of them I probably like don't even remember, but I think when I first started out, I think my first ever like creative facing internship was actually like under a grant for the university. And they brought me on to do like almost like design mentoring and designing to create a program that actually helps new students and like helps students that are transferring in or students that are like still getting a lay of the land really understand the tips and tricks that we being students that were a little bit older or like deeper into our degree at that time, probably like sophomores, were able to give them advice on. So that was like my first ever internship.
And to get that, was that something you had to apply for? Was it something they approached you and offered you the position?
So something that I noticed, and I think this is like a really amazing piece of advice that I wish I knew earlier on, but I definitely picked up along the way, and I wished a lot of students knew earlier on, was like college. And when you're pursuing something that you're passionate about is really one of those things where you have to kind of raise your hand, and it's not the place to like sit down and be like not interested in the classes that you're taking, especially in the creative field if it's something that you're passionate about. So I was one of those students where like I really knew that design was what I wanted to be. I participated in class because it was something I was interested in. I wanted to ask questions. I wanted to figure out how to get involved. Like if there was a boot camp that was going on, like I wanted to join it. I wanted to kind of find ways to elevate my learning more. And I think that kind of shined through in my personality, and the department and a lot of the professors knew that. And so a lot of the time opportunities began to come to me because they recognized me as that student who was passionate about design because of my participation in these classes. And they would sometimes reach out to me and say, hey, like we had this cool opportunity. Like, is this something that you would be interested in? And I think that was probably the gaining point for me in getting a lot of opportunities during my time in college.
Awesome. And the great thing there's, I think for many students who are listening, there's often many opportunities across universities for design students. So I think this is really great advice. And it also has, it's a nice stepping stone, right? Because you felt probably safe and comfortable because you most likely knew some of the folks you were working with. And it's a nice way of getting a lay of the land and starting to understand the industry without kind of taking that leap to be out of an environment you know.
No, absolutely. And I think one thing that is also like a super honorable mention is I remember being in uni and there, like, especially at CUNY schools, there was this like paper that the student government would pass around, and it's called like CUNY Service Corps, right? It's like one of those things they would pass it out and you're like, oh, this is cool. Like, I would never do that. Like, that has nothing to do with my career. That is like not going to be helpful to me at all. And I remember reading the flyer one day, getting the flyer and reading it and thinking like, wow, like I would really love to gain some more professional opportunities in my creative field. And I looked at the flyer and it's like, apply and get like to work at a nonprofit company that is directly in your field, whatever your field is. So I applied and I ended up going through the rounds of it and actually getting accepted into the program for CUNY Service Corps. And I feel like that was additionally like a super huge turning point in my career because the Service Corps program has such a great building momentum for students who are new that might not necessarily know how to, I guess, market their personal branding and get and break into their fields as a creative. And being in that program really helped me to understand, how do I interview? How do I talk about myself? How do I frame myself to different companies and understand what they have to offer and if that is something that I'm interested in? And it was amazing. So I would definitely recommend for any student that is looking for a position or looking for a way to break into the field to not like look down or like just bypass those flyers that they send out and those professional development opportunities, because it could really be a turning point.
Yeah, one of the things I was going to cover today was kind of what support you received in school to help you look for employment. And it seems like this was part of it. Did you also have additional support from your faculty members and from other programs at the school?
Definitely. I think something that I've learned is like, if you are confident in your skill and you let other people know that this is what you're passionate about, they will almost become like sponsors for you in rooms that you're not in. So, because I was passionate, a lot of people would, and especially a lot of my faculty supported me so much in like extending opportunities and saying, like, hey, like, you know, I think this would be something cool. If you're interested in it, like take a look out for it. And a lot of the times, like when I would be looking for opportunities, the people in the rooms that were kind of responsible for giving someone that opportunity would already have known who I was. So leaning on my faculty and using them as like a support system and being very transparent with them about where I was and making an effort to have like ongoing conversations with them, even outside of like a classroom setting, definitely helped.
And it sounds like when we were talking about internships, you said, you don't even know if you can remember them all. So I'm assuming you've had a few other work experiences while you still were a student. Can you pick one that was a highlight and talk to us about it?
Probably around my senior year. I hadn't started my senior year yet, but I was basically winding down as a junior and then starting my senior year. I was starting to build my LinkedIn because everyone says like LinkedIn is such a big thing. I had like one connection on LinkedIn and I was trying to figure out like, okay, like I need to build this thing because I want to be in the professional world. And how can I say I'm a professional if I'm not using LinkedIn and I'm not updating my profile and making an effort to show that? So I started building my LinkedIn, started connecting with a lot of people. And I got this connection. I would say it was around like early January 2021, right? And this individual connected with me, and he was like a manager of IT at this podiatric university. Didn't have any job opportunities, but he was just like, "Hey, like I saw your LinkedIn. It looks like you're interested in graphic design. Like, if I have any opportunities, like I would definitely love to swing them your way. Why don't you just share like your resume with me?" And I was like, sure, like I'll share my resume with you. Like I'll share whatever work I have with you. And I shared it with him and he was like, thanks. Like if anything comes up, I'll think of you. And I never really thought anything of that because on LinkedIn, like people tend to be really friendly. Like if they connect with you and they might ask to see your work or they might take a look at your profile and kind of scout you out and kind of think about who you are and how you work in an environment. And so, like I said, never thought anything of it. But 5 months later, roll around, it's like May, and I get a message from the same individual, and they're like, hey, like, we have our designer is urgently leaving our team, and we really need someone to like hop on. Like, are you available for part time work? And I was like,
Wow.
sure, like yeah, I'm available for part-time work, like no problem. And so sending him my updated information, and I kid you not, like a week after having that conversation of him just reaching out to me and saying like, hey, remember me, like I have this opportunity, I literally was in a meeting with him and his manager who was like the CMO, and I got hired to do this part-time job in this small little cute office, podiatric university in Harlem. I had my own room, my own computer, my own everything. It was super great. I'm literally like actually still doing work for them to this day. It was such an amazing opportunity. I think it just goes to show like don't knock people who are asking for you and don't knock them if they don't have an opportunity for you right away, because just being like a friendly face and like introducing myself, that took me a very far way, and that definitely gave me the boost I needed coming out of college to have this role that I was doing that was actively helping me gain experience in the field as a designer. So it was an amazing opportunity.
So I want to fast forward. You're getting ready to graduate. Did you know what type of work you were going to look for when you were graduating?
Oh man, I love this question because I talk about my struggle in this all the time, and I still talk about it now. I always say, like, coming out of college, the one thing that I think is inevitable, but if you can try to avoid it, that would put you in an amazing position is understanding what the roles really mean. When you're graduating, you have all these amazing skills, and you're like, you might still be in a place where you're like, I want to be a designer or I want to be a creative. Like, you have this sense of what your skills are, and you have the idea of what you think that title means in the agency or the creative world. But once you graduate, like, you don't actually know, like, wait, what does it mean to be a designer? What does it mean to be an art director? What does it mean to be an animator? Like, what does this job position really mean? And I think when I came out of college, I had this sense of, I know I wanted to be a creative still, but I didn't necessarily understand what those roles actually meant. And so I remember graduating and applying to everything under the sun. If it had designer in the title, I was applying. If it had creative anything, I was applying to it. I probably applied to like hundreds of jobs on LinkedIn. Like, not in a way of me not necessarily just trying to grab any position, even though in a way that's what it was, but I just wasn't educated enough on what the roles meant. So I wasn't aware enough that I could be pickier about what I was interested in, what my skill level was, and what companies had to offer. And so I really wish that I had done more research. I really was applying to everything under the sun.
I'm curious how that process went. Like, were you landing interviews? Did it lead to anything, or do you feel like you were casting such a wide net that no one really knew exactly who you were or where you would fit in?
I was definitely landing some interviews. So I was definitely getting interviews. I was, doing the interviews, and I was getting my heart broken a lot because I was doing interviews that, from my perspective, I felt was going really well. But at some points, like, would just not hear back. Like, I would meet like 2 or 3 interviews in, have a really good conversation, and then just never hear back from like the hiring manager or from the team. And I realized now, looking back on that it wasn't necessarily that I didn't have the skills to be on those teams, and it wasn't necessarily that I wasn't a good fit for those teams. And a lot of times I was beating myself up, like, why are these companies not getting back to you? Like, I'm not delusional. I know I did a good job on these interviews. I know that we were like having a good vibe in our personalities. Like, why am I not hearing back? And it was definitely hard, but I started to realize, like, every company is looking for something specific in the role that they're hiring in. And you might have the skills for that role, but they might be looking for a specific type of strong skill or personality that you might not exhibit. So, for example, if I have leadership skills and I am a leader on any team, and I can definitely like make sure that everyone pulls things together and gets it done in a good time frame, and that team that's hiring has 2 people that are leaders already, I might be a great fit for that opportunity. But if they're not looking for another leader, then I'm not a good fit. So I started to realize that, there will be a team that is looking for someone that is in your fit. But if you don't get hired, it doesn't mean that you didn't do a good job. It just means that they were probably looking for someone that had a different, strong set of skills.
Vash, I got to say, I love that your example was a positive one. I really appreciate that it wasn't, it could have went other ways, but the idea that you already exhibit those leadership qualities, and that could actually, be what prevents you from getting a job, I think is a unique story to share that's going to be really helpful for people to hear. I do think that these companies should be getting back to candidates and letting them know that they didn't get the job instead of ghosting them. And I'm curious if you, and I'm guessing you probably did after just meeting you for this past 20 minutes and learning more about you, were you reaching back out to these companies to say, hey, can you provide any feedback on, why I didn't get the position?
No, absolutely. Yes. And some of them just are so busy and they give you like really vague responses, and some of them like will explain, but I think for the most part it was just kind of like having to have like that harsh moment where like you are in the confusion and not understanding, and then just like kind of ending it on a positive note. Like, one thing that I've learned is like, even if you don't get a job opportunity and you don't necessarily understand why, like reaching out goes such a long way, and just saying like, hey, like, thank you so much for considering me for this opportunity anyways. Like, thank you so much for just giving me an opportunity to chat, and still holding on to those connections, because you might have learned something from those interviews that you can circle back and ask additional questions that could help you in the future. Or you can always reconnect with that person if there's an open position in the future that actually better fits your skills.
So from that initial round of applying, did you end up landing a full-time job?
So I actually ended up going into two different roles, but more like one fellowship, one internship kind of role. It's kind of funny. So I guess I'll lead with the first story. I was interviewing with Dentsu for a while, and they had like an open associate designer role, and I was super interested in it. And I had got through like 3 rounds or 4 rounds of interviews. It was going really well. And then they decided like the team didn't have the budget for the role anymore. So they kind of pulled the role and held it off to open it at a later time. And that sucked so much.
I mean, that happens a lot. I tell people that because what happens often in our fields are projects are supposed to come in, the company starts staffing up for a project to come in, and then the project doesn't come. So that's a pretty common thing. So while it's unfortunate you went through that, I think it's a good learning experience and sharing experience.
Absolutely. And the funny thing about that opportunity, that full-time opportunity falling through, was Dentsu had a summer internship program. And because I was already connected with the manager or the hiring manager, I ended up being able to apply for the internship program and actually getting into the internship program. So I spent the summer doing creative strategy at Dentsu, and it was so great. It was really awesome because I think it taught me two things. Um, when I was applying for roles, I had this mindset that I want to go to the biggest, most amazing company that has the best kind of title or has the best reputation in the creative world, because their work is going to be amazing and I'm going to have the most dandiest time there. Those companies made me realize that like you might, just because the company is amazing and dandy doesn't mean that you will find the more personable things that you're looking for. And along the way of having positive but also failed opportunities, you'll begin to realize that like there are things that are important to you in the creative world. So being in that opportunity first made me realize that creative strategy was not for me. I went into strategy, piggybacking off of that point of me coming out of college and not knowing, wanting to be in creative, but not knowing what that title of what I wanted to do actually meant. I realized that that strategy role was a little bit too far from creative, and art direction was actually something that I was more keen to and interested to. And it also made me realize how much I value those more personable relationships and companies where the creative communities are more aligned and they can definitely have more of a deeper communication, because sometimes at really larger companies, not just Dentsu, but I think this goes around the block for any large creative agency or company, people don't always know each other. And you can definitely end up being siloed into like, you know, just what your team does and just your surrounding team. And so I think that was such a valuable lesson that I learned. And I was so glad that I learned that lesson, both about where my interests lied and about what companies I was more going to be interested in before I landed my full-time role.
So you have the internship, and then you mentioned there's a second job. You want to talk about that one?
Yeah, so over the summer, I also did this 100 Roses of Concrete Growth Initiative Fellowship. And that was a 10-week program where I got to ironically also be in strategy. That was kind of like my double up in realizing that strategy wasn't for me. But that was such an amazing program because it really allowed me to, first of all, have these amazing conversations. Part of being in that initiative was they have these chats called Sunnyside chats, and you get to hear from different professionals in the industry that really help you understand each level of a creative role. And you're working on really small teams, I think about 9 people, and everyone has their independent role. So there would be literally just one strategist, one producer, one art director, one media planner. And like each of these people are exhibiting and performing the traits of this specific role. So that also really helped me understand like what do each of these roles mean? And by watching them perform those skills of those roles to help us design the 30-second spot that we were doing for the purpose of that fellowship, I really understood better like this is what an account manager does and this is what a project manager does, and really kind of understanding the dissection of each of those roles. So that was awesome too.
So those seem like they both were during the summer. So that kind of wraps up. What happens next?
So coming off of that, I was going through this interviewing process for actually months. I had started it in about February of 2022, and then it was still ongoing up to like May, June of 2022 for this program called Ad Fellows. And I remember going through the interviewing process, and sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to get this opportunity. Like, I was really nervous. I remember having like an initial interview and like kind of not feeling like I did my best because I literally remember the hiring manager saying, like, you did a okay job, but like everyone, you're going to reach a point in your career where like every creative has amazing work and you have to figure out what is that one thing that differentiates you from everyone else. And I remember feeling really disappointed and thinking like, I don't know if I'm going to get into this program. Like, I don't know if this is really what I want to do. This is like just another Ad Fellows being another 9-month full time fellowship. I'm like, is this what I want to do? I don't know. And so I ended up getting an offer around June of 2022 for this program. And I remember reaching out to my mentor and saying, "Oh my God, I got this opportunity, but I'm really nervous because like it's a 9-month fellowship, and I don't know if this is what I want to do because after going through so many experiences already, like I think I want a full time role. Like I don't know if I want to do this 9-month thing and then end up." Having to look for a job after this ends.
Sure.
And then I remember him saying to me, like, let's accept this offer and realize that you don't necessarily have an obligation to anyone. So if something was to fall through and you were to have another amazing opportunity come through, like you could absolutely respectfully say like, hey, like something else came up and I can't move forwards with this. But you're better off to accept it and have this thing under your belt than to not have something coming up 3 months from now at that point, which was June, right? So August rolls around, the program is starting. I don't have anything else lined up at the time. And I go through with it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to start this program. We're going to do it and we're going to see what's going on. And so I remember starting on that induction day, our first day in person. It was like the 17th of August. And I feel like after going through that literally first induction day of the program, I was so glad that I joined the Ad Fellows program. I was so happy that I joined it. I remember thinking like, this is exactly where I need to be right now. This opportunity is so amazing and so much deeper and has so much more to offer than what I understood at the time prior to actually starting. So I'm so glad to have joined that and to be doing that right now still actually.
Great. Can you tell folks a little bit more about the program and where it's taken you so far?
So the Ad Fellows program is a 9-month fellowship program. And instead of just being interns at companies, you're actually contracted to any company that you go to. So you get to rotate through 4 different companies, which is a combination of agencies and brand side. The program has 24 partners and they range from like super amazing companies from Pentagram to RGA to Walmart to United to Disney advertising. And the focus of the program is around marketing and advertising. So they have 3 tracks: general, data, and creative. And when you apply, you sort of specify which track you're most interested in. For me, I obviously applied to the creative track, and that's where I landed my position, like being on the creative track in the program. And you get to rotate through, like I said, 4 companies, and it's kind of split up. So there are like 24 different ad fellows that get selected into the program. And then each of you get 4 different companies to rotate at. So for me, I got to rotate at Zenith, which is under Publicis Group. I got to rotate at Walmart Connect, and I got to rotate at FKA, which is also under Publicis Group. And then lastly, now I'm wrapping up and I'm at RGA. So I'm really excited. I've been able to have amazing creative roles. So I've gone from media planning to design to being an art director role, which is what I'm doing right now at RGA.
That's awesome. And do you feel like you finally kind of know where your path in this creative field is going to land?
Oh, absolutely. I think the beautiful thing that I have learned is that design and art direction is definitely where I want to be. I love being a designer. I'm very passionate about it. And I have a strategic thinking brain, and I think about every step of the creative process, which gives me a unique kind of perspective on being an art director. So I definitely have a clear idea of where my career journey is going. And being able to rotate through all of these amazing companies, I mean, Publicis Group, RGA, I even got paired with a mentor during the program who is like a partner at Pentagram. So having all these amazing opportunities to be in rooms that I would have never imagined myself being in has allowed me to really analyze like what I'm looking for in a company and what would be a best fit for me as a creative.
So now you're in your last placement that, is going to end in, what is it, a few months? Is that how long the placements are?
Yeah, each placement is about 2 months. So we're literally in March now, and we're wrapping up in May, the last rotation.
So what are your plans next?
So here's a little amazing thing about the Ad Fellows program. We go through this thing called job opportunity, which is essentially every company that is partnered with the program, which, like I said, is 24 companies. They all open at least 2 positions, obviously at their own discretion, like depending on what their market is looking like and if they can afford to do that and offer roles. They open 2 roles, ideally, each company for Ad Fellows only. So it is essentially like a closed door job opportunity process where you are still competing, obviously, with your other Ad Fellows for these roles that these companies open, but you're not competing with anyone else in the open job market. So as opposed to having like, I don't know, like anywhere from like 200 to 500 other applicants applying for roles in the field that you're interested in, you're only competing with 24 other Ad Fellows if they're even interested in the role that has been opened. So I'm currently going through that process right now. We actually started at the end of February. We got our roster, which shows like what jobs the companies have opened, and we get to apply and kind of go through an ideal same application process as you would in the wild. And it's been really great so far. So I'm excited to kind of see how those interviews go and to see where I end up at the end of this. And I know that no matter where it is, like I will be absolutely happy.
That's awesome. Well, I'm excited to follow along, Vash, and figure out where you land. So before we head off today, what advice do you have to those students that are going to be graduating soon?
Oh, advice. I would say network as much as you can. Put yourself out there and don't be afraid to reach out to people that you admire and that you think they are doing amazing work in the field, and just asking for an informational interview. Just asking like, hey, like I would love to learn a little bit about you. I would love to learn about your role. Can you give me some advice? Ask alumni at your school to be a mentor. Ask them to guide you. Raise your hand in rooms and just network with the people in your department, because they have hands in so many things that you might not even know about. And they can really give you that push to help you and be like, hey, check out this opportunity. Like it might be good for you. And it could push you into the room that you will be so happy in.
I couldn't have said that better. So thank you for saying that for me. And thank you so much for being here today.
Of course. Thank you so much, Abby. It's been awesome.
Thank you all so much for listening. We'd love to hear your feedback. Feel free to send us a message or leave us a review. To learn more about the show, check out our website at designtogetherpod.com. Special thanks to Rob Weston at Great Magnet Recording Concerns for providing our post-production.